Morning. My name is Leigh Fairclough, and I am the candidate for the Ontario Liberal Party here in Etobicoke Lakeshore. It really is my pleasure to welcome you to Etobicoke Lakeshore. I'm very pleased to have many special guests joining us as we gather today. I'm also very pleased to welcome Stephen Del Duca. Stephen understands the pain that so many in Ontario are feeling right now. He is presenting bold solutions to these very urgent problems. He's offering voters a choice in this election, a Conservative government that's going to cut with chaos with no plan, or a Liberal government that will invest to make Ontario a place to grow again. So please join me in welcoming the next Premier of Ontario, Stephen Del Duca.
Well, good morning. So very happy to be here today with all of you back in Etobicoke Lakeshore, to stand alongside Leigh and a number of women and men, as you see, who have direct expertise, direct knowledge and experience about what's happening on the front lines of healthcare here in Ontario today. But first, let me say, a couple of days ago when we released our election platform, our roadmap that will help our province grow once again, I was so proud of course, all of the elements of that platform. But when you think about how fundamentally important public health care is in this province, I was particularly thrilled with the work that our team, including our candidates, put into that election platform, put into that document, that work, again, in particular as it relates to public health care. And I just wanted to say here publicly to Leigh and to the rest of our candidates who do have direct expertise as nurses, as doctors, in Leigh's case, as someone who was running a hospital and doing so much exceptional work in that capacity. And by the way, in previous capacities within healthcare, I just wanted to say publicly to Leigh, thank you so much for your advice, for your input, for your guidance, and most importantly, thank you, Leigh, for the work that you have done throughout this pandemic to help support the families in this province who are often relying on a public healthcare system that has gone through so much over these past 4 years. A healthcare system that has suffered because of, as Leigh said a second ago, the cuts and the chaos and the lack of commitment from the Ford Conservatives to a publicly funded universal healthcare system. Now, we know right now in Ontario that when you look at the stats, the numbers are of grave concern. We know, for example, that only about 40% of those who need MRIs in Ontario today are able to get them in time. We know that roughly 30% of Ontarians who need prostate cancer surgery are being delayed. They're stuck in limbo. We know that somewhere north of 160% of the young people in this province who need some kind of diagnostic procedure are being kept waiting. But it's not just about the numbers. It's about the stories and the people behind those numbers. It's about the families who are concerned, who in many cases are understandably scared about the fact that they're not able to get surgery for themselves, diagnosis for themselves, or for loved ones, for family members. This isn't good enough. An Ontario Liberal government would make the investments that are required to make sure that our publicly funded healthcare system is set up and is supported and has adequate resources to deal with the surgical and diagnostic backlog that is such a challenging circumstance for Ontario families at this critical moment. For example, according to the OMA, we know that there are roughly 1 million surgeries and diagnostic procedures that are part of the backlog. 1 million in this province. That rivals or is the same as Ontario's second largest city. That's a million individuals. It's a million families that are suffering, that are being confronted with the anxiety about what might come next. So we need a government that fully understands that this has to be fixed, and that it doesn't just have to be fixed, it has to be fixed within our publicly funded health care system. Publicly funded. Not the creeping privatization that we see consistently from the Conservatives. I said this just the other day. Conservatives just can't help themselves. They can't help themselves. We've seen this movie before, and frankly, the sequel under Doug Ford is far worse than the original, especially given how grueling the past 2 years have been for the people of Ontario. To starve our public services and then invite that creeping privatization to come in, to make some people make a quick buck off this, is just unconscionable. So under the Ontario Liberal plan, over the next 2 years, we will invest $1 billion, $1 billion to help clear the unacceptable surgical and diagnostic procedure backlog that, again, is currently essentially Ontario's largest city. We will make this happen within 2 years. And I'm so... And this $1 billion over 2 years will help make sure that we expand our capacity in our hospitals, our public hospitals. It will make sure that we have the staffing in place. It will make sure that we can run our MRI procedures, our CT scan procedures, our operating rooms, full tilt, on weekends, on evenings, again, that they're properly staffed and properly funded and properly supported. We're going to develop in partnership with those who understand how to get this job done. We're going to partner to make sure we have a centralized booking system, so the inefficiencies in the system are no longer going to hold us up from clearing this particular backlog. We're going to come up with an e-referral system, again, to make it easier and more efficient for patients and their families to navigate the system. And we are going to make sure that the maximum wait times are set and are measured against, to make sure that by the end of 2022 in particular, the so-called long waiters, the people who are having to wait, in some cases, double the length of time that they should have to wait for procedures, are brought down below those maximum wait times. All of this will require significant new investment, but it is also going to require an ironclad commitment to public health care, to public hospitals, and a commitment to the women and men who work on the front lines of our hospital and healthcare system. Our nurses, our PSWs, our doctors, our diagnostic technicians, the entire publicly funded ecosystem that people in Ontario love, that people in Ontario desire to see built stronger and become more resilient. The Ontario Liberal government will get this done with this investment and the people who work on the front lines. And as I say throughout this campaign, and have said and will continue to say, there is a clear choice in this election campaign. A choice between the Ford Conservatives, who, like so many other Conservatives before them, are quite open and prepared to allow that creeping privatization to take over elements of our healthcare system, and an Ontario Liberal team, including people like Leigh Fairclough and so many others, who understand in a real and genuine way what's required to make sure that we deliver on this commitment, a commitment of a publicly funded healthcare system that the hardworking families of Etobicoke Lakeshore and the hardworking families of Ontario can truly count on. Thank you very much for being here today, and I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, we're going to move to a Q&A right now. We've got some reporters on site, so we'll take those questions first. If you want to just line up behind the mic, and then I will move over to the Zoom line afterwards. To reporters on the line, just raise your hand using the Zoom function, please.
Morning, Stephen.
Morning,
by now, you've probably heard about Stephen Lecce and the university slave auction situation. Just looking for your thoughts on that. What should happen with him? What would you like to see done?
You know, my understanding is that Mr. Lecce has offered up an apology. Obviously, it's a deeply troubling circumstance. I think it's important for, not so much for someone like me, but for the people in the communities that he is, in essence, apologizing to. I think it's best for them to be able to tell you publicly how they're feeling about the apology, whether they believe it's good enough, because, in fact, you know, it is troubling. It is troubling, but it is an important part of a conversation that needs to occur. And again, the people who are affected by this kind of unacceptable behavior should be the ones to engage in the conversation with Mr. Lecce.
And you're good with the apology yourself?
You know,
what do you think the Tories should be doing?
I don't think an individual like me, given my position, given my privilege, should be commenting on something like this. I think it's the people who are directly impacted by unacceptable and deeply, deeply troubling behavior who should be a part of the conversation. I understand he's apologized, but I think it's best. I think it is best left to, you know, to racialized Ontarians, vulnerable Ontarians who who are in a position of having to deal with this kind of behavior far too often for them to be in a position to respond to whether or not his apology is good enough.
All right, just one quick follow. Every party over the years has had problems with vetting, and I'm wondering if you've had any candidates this election that you've been concerned about.
So in fact, just
or
in the
potential candidate.
Yeah, just in the last couple of days, we had a candidate in the riding of Sault Ste. Marie, some stuff information that was not disclosed to us during the vetting process, and that candidate is no longer running for the Ontario Liberal Party. I'm quite proud of the hard-working group of volunteers who've been running our vetting process from day one, and I'm also even more proud of the exceptional candidates like Leigh Fairclough and so many others, women and men who step forward from every walk of life, a team of talent who are literally ready to start the job on day one.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Del Duca.
Hey, Colin.
We learned that a total of 8 Ontario PC MPPs have been billing their riding associations for a variety of expenses, everything from meals, entertainment, auto expenses, and some miscellaneous expenses that we simply don't know. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what that situation is and whether you think it's a slush fund of money and whether you think it's appropriate.
Look, I think right now here in the province of Ontario, so many families are facing an affordability crisis. We see the cost of everything, the cost of food, the cost of owning a home, trying to purchase a home, to rent a home, everything going in the wrong directions. I think it is, again, I'll use the word troubling. I think it is troubling for those individuals who are receiving an MPP's compensation or salary, and then, frankly, from this particular party, telling the people of Ontario that they had to freeze the minimum wage 4 years ago. Telling the people of Ontario that they can't have access to paid sick leave, for example. Telling the people of Ontario who are on ODSP that they're not going to have the rates increased, and then after a budget is introduced where they have no costing for a rate increase, they come out with a belated 5% announcement just the other day out of nowhere. I think, to me, that's the particularly troubling part, when so many people who are working hard in Ontario are suffering and falling further and further behind. Members of a government who have been, with their approach, have been callous and cruel as it relates to those individuals engaging in this behavior, I think is deeply troubling.
So do you think the laws need to be changed then to outlaw the practice of billing a riding association for all kinds of fees? Because of course the riding associations are subsidized by taxpayers as well.
Yeah, so a number of months ago I made a commitment to appoint a citizens' assembly on all aspects of our democracy, how we deal with elections, election laws. That could include and probably should include election finance laws. And I'm committed, and the Ontario Liberal government will appoint that Citizens' Assembly. I want all parties involved, like all political parties, obviously Elections Ontario, academics, advocates involved in that process. I think it should be thorough, and I think it should have the opportunity to examine everything, including election finance laws.
Okay, and just on another topic, yesterday you rebranded the Ontario Liberal Party as the new Ontario Liberal Party. I don't know if a lot of people would necessarily see the difference or the distinction, so could you help us out? What is new about the new Ontario Liberal Party that is so different from Kathleen Wynne or Dalton McGuinty?
Sure. New leadership, new team, new compelling, fair, fully costed, and forward-looking plan. 3 key elements. I'll say it again. New leadership, a new team of exceptional candidates, including Leigh Fairclough, and a place to grow. Our platform that is forward-looking, and it is fair, and best of all, it's fully costed, balanced, and responsible. A roadmap for everybody across Etobicoke, Lakeshore, and across Ontario to understand exactly what an Ontario Liberal government would do, when we would do it, how we would do it, and how we would pay for it. That is the new leadership that is competent and responsible, and I believe that's what the people of this province want.
Hey, Stephen.
Morning.
Morning. I'll let you have your water.
I can listen at the same time. I can listen at the same time. It's okay.
If you saw me driving here, you'd see how good I am at multitasking too.
Careful behind the wheel.
About Stephen Lecce, you're both Vaughan guys. You didn't serve in provincial parliament at the same time, but do you know him very well, and do you think he's racist?
So I guess, of course, I've met Mr. Lecce on a number of occasions. You're right. We are both, I believe he's still a resident of Vaughan. Look, I think, as I said just a second ago, I'm a person who's had a lot of privilege in my life. And I don't think I'm best positioned to make a comment about whether another individual is racist or not. I think the behavior he engaged in is unacceptable. I think it is reprehensible. I think it is clearly regrettable. I know that he's apologized for it. I think the communities that have been impacted by far too much of this unacceptable behavior are far better positioned and more appropriately positioned to respond to his apology than someone like me. So I will encourage and let them, not let, but I will look forward to them explaining how they feel about his apology, because it's best coming from them.
Have you heard from your black or other candidates of color about this incident or situation? Of course, it happened, or the story was published late last night, but what have they told you then?
So I haven't had the chance to speak with them yet, but you know, it's early in the day today, and I'm sure that we'll be having conversations over the course of today and the rest of this week for sure. And I would only say that I don't want to get ahead of myself with respect to those conversations, but every time we see this kind of behavior come out, whether it's from those in a position of public trust, like a cabinet minister or other leaders, it is obviously deeply troubling. It's a wound that never really kind of heals, right? For those individuals who've been impacted in a negative way by this behavior. But it is important for them to be able to respond with respect to whether or not his apology is acceptable or good enough.
I just don't think it would be unusual for, again, about you both being from Vaughan, you know, there'd be community events, whereas both as politicians, you might both appear at. Would you want to be at events with him after this if you're both elected, or would you avoid those in the future?
Well, look, I think it's an interesting question. I think that there's obviously a responsibility as an elected official to be out there, whether at a local level or as I'm now running to be premier of this province, going forward to help build up the province in education, healthcare, and in so much else. And I think that it is best for us to wait and see how impacted Ontarians and communities across Ontario feel about a senior cabinet minister's apology in response to his very clearly unacceptable behavior before we make any decisions going forward.
Stephen Richard with City News. I think you made your point really clear, but I just one other small point. You're not calling on Mr. Lecce to resign his candidacy, correct?
No, I'm not calling on him to resign his candidacy. Again, I think that I know he's apologized. I know, and let me be crystal clear about this, the behavior, reprehensible, unacceptable, appalling, has no place in the kind of Ontario that I know Ontarians believe in any way, shape, or form. But I think in particular for racialized communities in this province, it is probably well beyond the point where individuals like me who have privilege should be making comments about whether an apology from another person of privilege is good enough. You know, I haven't been impacted by racism in my life, so to stand here and say that I'm an authority on this would be inappropriate and the wrong thing to do, and I won't do that. I want racialized Ontarians to be able to respond as to whether or not his apology is good enough for them, and we'll go from there.
Sir, you're here taking lots of questions from reporters today, and Ms. Horvath, I believe, is planning to do the same. Mr. Ford is not, at this point, planning to take any questions from reporters. It's my understanding he left the debate without doing so yesterday as well. Should leading candidates be taking questions on a daily basis during a campaign, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. Lots of questions. I think that at the end of the day, when you're running to be premier of this province, to go into hiding, I think is completely unacceptable. To arrogantly not show up when, by the way, not just people across the north, but the Federation of Ontario Northern Ontario Municipalities, FONOM, that organized yesterday's debate, put a lot of work into that. They were expecting Mr. Ford to show up to the scrum. When he bolted out of the building, jumped on the car or the bus or whatever he got into, and sped out of the parking lot to avoid any accountability from members of the media, it was a slap in the face to the organizers. It was a slap in the face to the people of Northern Ontario. And it's a slap in the face and shows complete disregard for democracy. I mean, I suspect Doug Ford's embarrassed about his record over the past 4 years, and goodness knows he should be. But you got to face the music on election campaigns, especially given that this is the conversation about where we want Ontario to go next. So this in hiding, peekaboo, missing in action campaign strategy that I know Mr. Ford and his team have come up with, I think it shows a blatant disregard for the people of Ontario. I think it shows an arrogance, and I think that they're concerned because I suspect right about now, Doug Ford's team knows that he's in way over his head, and he does not have the capacity to lead this province, and they're just hoping that the 15 million people in this province don't realize that too, but they're wrong. because the people of Ontario do understand he is the wrong person for this job, particularly at this moment in time.
Lastly, for me, I was thinking about transit getting over here in Toronto morning traffic. Would you, if elected Premier, would you continue with plans to build this Ontario subway line? And what would you do with subways?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. I've said this repeatedly. I think the easiest thing to do, and I say this as a lifelong resident of the GTHA, the easiest thing for leaders and ministers to do is to tear up old maps and draw new lines on new maps. That's not going to give anybody the transit service that they need here in Toronto or beyond. What we need to do is continue to build in every way possible, in every community possible, not just the GTHA, but everywhere. So any transit project that is advanced and funded and on the books right now will continue under an Ontario Liberal government. But at the same time, because you all know transit projects can take a long time to get completed, at the same time, we will make transit more accessible and affordable within 100 days of taking office. And of course, I'm talking about Buck a Ride province-wide, where people who take public transit or who are going to come back to public transit will literally save thousands of dollars per year in some cases. If you live here in Toronto and you pick up a Metro Pass, a monthly Metro Pass, and you're an adult, Buck a Ride province-wide is going to save you over $1,300 per year. And it's going to be good for the environment and good for the economy, and it's going to boost transit ridership. So yeah, we're going to keep building, and we're going to create more transit options and service everywhere in Ontario. And at the same time, we're going to make it so much more affordable for you to leave your car at home, keep the air clean, and hop on a bus, a GO train, a transit, a GO train, a streetcar, an LRT vehicle, whatever it is that's working in your community.
Morning, Mr. Del Duca.
Morning.
I wanted to ask you about auto insurance. It's not mentioned in your platform at all. Do you feel that the current auto insurance system in Ontario is working?
You know, I think there's a very broad affordability crisis that we have in this province right now, and I think that also touches upon, I'll say intersects with the auto insurance system that we have. I think it's a very complex system, and I think it's very hard for motorists and their families in this province to fully understand how the rates are set. I think there's a lot of concerns, but I think the broader concern, or the broadest concern, relates to affordability generally speaking. And so that's why in our platform we've included a series of measures that will go right at the affordability concerns Ontarians have. So for example, I just talked about Buck a Ride province-wide. You know that any prepared food under $20 under an Ontario Liberal government will become 8% cheaper when we take the HST off everything you're purchasing, whether that's at a local bakery or a restaurant or a grocery store. As long as it's under $20, 8% off every single transaction. If you're a vulnerable senior in this province, we're going to top up the old age security pension benefit that you get. We're going to add another $1,000 to the hardest hit and most vulnerable seniors. We've talked about ODSP rates. We're going to raise those by 20% over the next 2 years. So this is our housing plan, bringing back rent control, making it cheaper and easier to buy a home for first-time home buyers. So I'm just trying to, I guess, sort of paint the picture about we recognize as a party and as a potential future government that affordability concerns are top of mind, and understandably so for hardworking families, and we have a plan that will go right at those and help them deal with it.
So then are there no improvements that your government could make or would make to the auto insurance system?
You know, we'll continue to look for ways to make auto insurance accessible and affordable and fair for people, regardless of where they live in this province. That is something, of course, that is an issue that definitely flares up from time to time, and it's understandable. But I think on balance, it's about the totality of the affordability crisis that hardworking Ontario families are facing. And the Ontario Liberal Plan, A Place to Grow, has a very clear set of ideas that we will implement, many of them urgently, in order to confront the affordability crisis.
Just one more thing about Mr. Lecce. This situation is unfortunately all too similar to what happened in the 2019 federal election with the photos of Justin Trudeau in his past doing blackface. You know, how do you square these two things, given that Trudeau himself was reelected Prime Minister twice after that and is the leader of your federal counterpart?
Look, I'm not going to try to square the circle. I think Mr. Trudeau's behavior was also unacceptable, and I think it was also deeply hurtful to many Canadians. I think he spoke about it openly and honestly, and I think the people of Canada had a chance to judge his comments on that particular incident from his past, and through our democracy, they chose to re-elect him in that instance. But there's no doubt about the fact that those behaviors, whether they come from him or Mr. Lecce or frankly anybody, are completely unacceptable in a province and a country like ours, and they need to be called out. But most importantly, when apologies are offered, it is not appropriate for people of privilege like me to make a comment about whether those apologies are good enough. It's up to the people who are directly and negatively impacted and have been for far too long by this kind of behavior to judge and to assess whether or not the apologies are sufficient.
And just on the healthcare piece in your platform.
Right, great.
Thank
you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Hey, no problem. The NDP, they are proposing to accelerate the dental coverage and go further than what the federal government is planning on doing. They have commitments towards pharmacare in their platform as well. I'm just wondering why your party stopped short of doing things such as that.
So look, anybody can come up with words on a piece of paper, but I am someone, and I believe most Ontarians are of the same mind. Until you actually produce all of the information, and what I'm talking about now, of course, is the lack of any costing, any fiscal framework, any budgetary impact. And by the way, we're now 16 days since Andrea Horwath and the NDP released their platform. And you've heard me say this before, since they released their platform, we've had a provincial budget. We've had an Auditor General who has commented on that provincial budget, and we are now, it feels like well over a month past the Financial Accountability Officer also putting out his fiscal framework, or their fiscal framework. So all of that information about Ontario's state of play fiscally is out there. I just don't understand how it's possible that Andrea Horwath's team can still be crunching the numbers, as she said just yesterday. So commitments to dental care or pharmacare or whatever she's going to comment on today or tomorrow or the next day, until you and I know, until the people of Ontario know how much it's going to cost and where that money is going to come from and who's on the hook to pay those bills, I don't think any of it can actually be taken seriously. I'll also say after 2 years of COVID and 4 years of Doug Ford's cuts and chaos and flipping and flopping and flailing, the last thing the people of Ontario want is to be taken out of the frying pan and being thrown back into the fire. This is not a moment to take unnecessary risk. And right now, the fact that after 16 days the NDP can't produce a costing document, days after we have, weeks after others have, tells me that that's a risk or a bridge that's just too far for the people of Ontario who want responsible and competent leadership in this moment. They're going to get it from Ontario Liberals. They've got Doug Ford, who's got a budget with no plan. They've got Andrea Horwath, who has a platform with no numbers. Only one party, one team, one leader has the plan, has the costing, and has the team to actually deliver.
And last thing, I'd be remiss if I did not ask, have you yourself ever done blackface or attended a slave auction?
No.
Okay, we're going to move over to the line now. Just a reminder to reporters on the line to raise your hand using the Zoom function, and I will call on you for a question. The first question is from Natasha McDonald-Dupuy from Radio Canada. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Morning.
Francophone issues were totally ignored yesterday during the leaders' debate, despite the fact that many Franco-Ontarians live in the north.
Yeah.
And last fall, you told me that you did not feel like it's important for the leader of the Liberal Party of Ontario to speak French. My question to you is, have you started, you said it wasn't important for you to speak French to advocate for Franco-Ontarians.
Well, yeah, just put it in the full context, right?
My question is, have you started taking French classes again? And why didn't you say a word about Francophone issues during the debate?
So just so there's complete clarity in front of the entire audience today, what I said when we spoke last about this topic was that when you think about what advocacy is required for Francophone Ontarians or Franco-Ontarians, to me it's about the ideas and it's about the progress you want to deliver. And I would say it is about those items and that progress that will matter to Franco-Ontarians and help them in their day-to-day lives. And I think that is an important thing for me to reinforce today because I believe that's still the case. Since we last spoke about this, no, I haven't had the opportunity to restart French lessons. I think everybody here knows that French is not my first language. It is something I have taken lessons in previously. This is I'll say an ongoing journey for me, like it is for many across the province of Ontario. And I do look forward to having the opportunity to once again start French lessons. I have tried, not always perfectly, but I have tried to include French content in some of the speeches that I've given over the past couple of years since becoming leader. And as it relates to the debate yesterday, I think that, I will just say, I think you probably know, we don't choose the questions that were being asked by the moderator or by the organizers of the debate, but had they asked about what services or what ideas we have in our respective platforms to help support Franco-Ontarians, I would have been very proud to speak about what's in the Ontario Liberal platform. For example, making sure that in the post-secondary space, in Northern Ontario in particular, that we have a sustainable funding. We have sustainable funding in place to make sure that the Université de Sudbury is set up and established as a francophone post-secondary institution, obviously in Sudbury in the north, to make sure that there are other measures brought forward, including once again having an independent commissioner. There's a series of measures that are included because caucus members and candidates, caucus members like Amanda Simard, Lucille Collard, many of our caucus members have worked, candidates have worked very, very hard to make sure that our platform is responsive to the needs of Franco-Ontarians, and that is something that I do take very, very seriously.
To be fair, many leaders brought up many topics that weren't asked about during the debate. Kathleen Wynne made a tremendous effort to learn French, Dalton McGuinty as well. By contrast, I'm reading the sign in front of you and it's only in English. So what do you say to Franco-Ontarians who feel that protecting the French language doesn't seem to personally interest you at all, since you're leaving it up to your Francophone candidates to carry this file?
Well, respectfully, I think Mr. McGuinty, actually growing up in Ottawa, and I believe had one Francophone parent, probably knew French from his earliest days. So, out of fairness, I think that, again, my commitment is clear on this. You look at our platform, you look at the ideas that we've included in the platform, and in particular, you consider how over 4 years, and I'm talking about in his earliest days as Premier, Doug Ford and his team decided to undercut and undermine and underfund, I should say, and undermine and disrespect Ontario's Francophone community from the very beginning, eliminating the independence of the Commissioner and taking canceling the French language university. There's a series of steps that they have taken, that they did take, actually triggered Ms. Simard from leaving their caucus and joining our caucus. She obviously felt that she could have confidence and faith in my leadership and our team to do the right thing by Franco-Ontarians. She and Ms. Collard and many others in our ranks of candidates have been exceptionally strong in this regard. And should we form government on June 2nd, they will all play leading roles with respect to making sure that we are making the investments to deliver real progress for Franco-Ontarians, something that is very important to me personally.
Okay, and there are no other questions on the line. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.